With climate change on the forefront of many minds, it is incumbent on us to design for a better future, which is exactly what our next speaker is doing. Ms. Elaine Yanling is founder of the Fabrique Lab, a textile consultancy dedicated to creating and developing experimental textile surfaces and materials for bespoke luxury environments. She will be sharing with us more about her important work and what it means for our collective future. Please give a big hand for Elaine.
Hi everyone, can you hear me all right? Okay, perfect. So I'm Elaine. I arrived Hong Kong about like 6-7 years ago, and it's really funny. I always get quite excited to introduce myself. A lot of people are like, Elaine, what do you do? I'm a textile designer. And knowing Hong Kong as a great textile hub, people will say, oh, you're a textile designer. So you go to some show and collect swatches, like ladies like this with a little trolley. I was like, not quite. To be precise, I'm a weaver. And they couldn't quite relate. What is a weaver? Like people weave with a wooden loom in the mountain. Yes, that's me in the mountain village in Guizhou. That's partially what I do, but with a little bit more technology. So on a more serious note, with my background, I'm trained as a weaver. I've been working with a lot of textile mills, but having been quite conscious in mind of how much waste the textile industry made yearly, one of the most polluting industry in the world. And being a designer, young designer, 10 years ago, it is really difficult even to do samplings in textile mills because the requirement exceeds what we could afford. For example, 100 meters per sample. Why would we need 100 meters per sample? If the sample goes wrong, they will go to landfill. So I started to look into the manufacturing system or sampling system even in a factory. Look at the amount of CO2 to create, the wastage, the head count that involve all just in sampling. And then I've decided I'm going to start my own studio and look into mini prototyping system and how we can shorten all these sampling methods and time, and also have a real showcase to show brands and take it to factory to show we can really push the boundary with new materials. Because often when I was in corporate jobs beforehand and also working in factories, they said, oh, Elaine, we can't get this done because we've never put this through the machines before, this might break the machine. But if we have equivalent machineries in our studio, then we have proven a point that we can debate, argue, and negotiate with factories. So I started my little journey in Koi Hing, industrial area in Hong Kong. This was a direct space I've rented since 2014, and now turned into my little textile hub with various type of prototyping machineries from a jacquard digital loom, 3D printing machines, heat press, and also very old-fashioned hand loom. And of course, some of the textiles we have created before showcasing that. So the idea of having this space is really to push boundaries of cross-disciplinary approach, of bringing different industry methodologies together with my understanding of textiles as a foundation. So a lot of people say, Elaine, so you're a textile designer or not? So to simplify the idea, I just tell people I'm a material girl. So with the studio that I work in, or my little fabric lab, we focus a lot in the discipline of what niches can provide, from the material, from the raw material, to biomimicry, to the engineering method that we can harvest. And of course, we work with a lot of craftsmen and see how we can also bring technology, low-tech and high-tech together. So with the first project I want to share, it's actually one of my oldest projects I have worked with, was commissioned by Swarovski in 2016. Actually, that project really helped me to set a foundation of how to showcase what textiles could be in engineering. So I love showing this picture to everyone because it's one of my favorite. I was like, oh, what is this? Does anyone know what this plant is? Sundew. It is a beautiful plant, very small, delicate, and fragile. But what it does is it lures the prey to sit on it quietly, starts suckling its sort of honeydew, and then when the insect is really enjoying its moment, the plant will then digest, intakes protein, and then you die happy and after. Well, insect, not you. But I was very inspired by this poetic mutation, so that's where the installation was inspired by. So that was one of the first large-scale installation I was commissioned in 2015, and then it came to Hong Kong at an art centre in 2016. So what's so special about this? Well, actually, when I received a design brief from Swarovski, they were saying, well, Elaine, can you just design something innovative? I was like, this is a very broad brief. Okay. So then I was invited to Batten, the headquarters, visit the factory to look into all the technologies. And I was very intrigued by how much engineering the company, the brand, has put into the products, but it was never really showcased. And all we sort of came across were those zodiac ornaments that you see in Swarovski's store. So I had opportunity to work with the engineers, and I really wanted to look into how Swarovski crystals can be a kinetic part as a component in the design rather than aesthetic elements, because at the end of the day, crystal glass is all about reflectivities when it moves, right? So instead of having you moving around, why don't it move around you? So I started a different experiment. Slides is talking faster than me. Just one more back. Oh. Okay. So then I started looking at how the textile can move and flow according to different way of moving, and then bringing in the programming elements using Arduino and 3D printing to create the miniatures to bring them in. And of course, we have to do the prototype in the studio, and it's sound activated. And then my phone rings. And then, of course, I really want to capture the beauty of the plant by making my own textiles. So then we created our own way of spinning the textiles instead of weaving the textiles, a non-woven that we created to mimic the ray of light being shined on the plant of sundew. And all these details really reflect the texture of the plant and then apply. But the fun thing was, how do we work with this with Swarovski crystals? Because normally they only work with the standard cotton and wool and polyester, and these were not the standard. So the fun part of the project is really to work with the engineer to really look into the new adhesive that we created together in order to captivate these colors through crystals and intensify the textiles as well. So that's one of the first projects I can really showcase the textiles. It's not just about a woven or non-woven, but how it can work with an extra layer of material on top to showcase its best quality. And of course, one of the fun things is when you look at textiles, a lot of time you look at a sheet of fabrics, but also I wanted people to look at it as a volume. So we use volumetric printing techniques because the actual tassels will move up and down, and also so then it looks like a moving image. So one side is encrusted with crystals, and the other side is just imagery. So not to mention we use 200,000 mini crystals in this project, so it's sort of like a Cinderella project for me. These are one of my favorite clips. A lot of the audience, they're really interacting with the installation itself to find their own way to curate. During 2015-16, I don't know if you still remember, that's a point where Facebook and Instagram has this check-in function, and everyone really cares about like where they've checked in, you know, at these social moments. Yes, I've checked into Art Basel. I am a very popular, sociable person, you know, never mind the artwork, a glass of champagne, hey. But then I got very frustrated. So the installation is also part of a journey that you must pay attention to artwork. If you don't interact, you don't get the reward of your self-curated piece of movement. Just like these kids, you know, they're so smart. Instead of making a sound, they discovered where the sensors were. So they would just been jumping up and down right next to the sensor, and we couldn't stop them. So that's one of the joy of bringing the textiles and Kinetic together. And to continue the journey, one of the more recent projects, I've worked and been commissioned by UBS, and I think more and more a lot of people have been asking, oh, so what are the sustainability angles and element when you work? And I think the first project was more on a biomimicry, more fun angle, but the coming project I'm going to introduce is really how do we drive sustainability through interactivity as a message. So UBS is sort of known as a bank, but then also actually they work very closely with sustainability development goals. And one of which, when we were in discussion in 2018, they really wanted to highlight to their clients of how they had sort of captured different types of data sets and how they've been using it carefully to help them to create wealth, you know. That's their job. So, does anyone know what this is? Looks so interesting, doesn't it? All these numbers. This was my design brief. With any designer sitting down here, it would be like an Excel file as your design brief. You must be kidding me. Yes, that's exactly my reaction. I was like, so how do I turn it into something interactive? This is part of a data set that was given of air quality data between 2016 and 2018 worldwide. In our discussion, we really want to showcase to show a memorable impact to the audience, how the world's climate has been changing through activities around the world. So one of my inspiration of this project came from mycelium, because the way how they harvest the data is through network and internet and robots, and I really want to reflect the whole idea of nature also has this system, and the system can be seen through mycelium and forest trees, how they share the nutrition and data through the mycelium system. Yeah, so this is the family of 3 that I've created, and the kiosk as the final outcome. But before that, I'll show you a little bit of the background.
Global air quality is such an important topic. Air is a fundamental element in our daily living. It's important for us able to monitor the changes of air quality so we can improve the way we behave and treat nature.
This design project asked, what is the impact on air quality broadly on the world? UBS Evidence Lab scours the planet for data that can be used to answer investment questions.
The sculpture demonstrates data of world air pollution collected by UBS Evidence Lab. I would like to see the sculpture as a reminder to everyone who cares about the environment.
It makes people realise actually this is something they care about, and I think that matters enormously.
Now the next question is, Elaine, how is this relevant to textile, right? I don't know if anyone knows, Jacquard is actually one of the earliest formation of computer in the world, and I felt that was one of the strong connection to showcase how the data is being harvested through computer nowadays and digitalizations, and we really should look back where the origin of the computer came from and how it related to craft. And so the entire sculpture is inlaid with hand-woven textiles, but the sculpture itself is 3D printed. So we try to minimize our footprint in terms of productions and to be as precise as possible. And to make it a little bit even more relevant to anyone who's close to coding, in Jacquard, when we code, it's saying the 0110. That's why we have black and white images when we send to the computer before it arrives to the Jacquard loom. And this is one of a piece that we're really proud of because it's the longest Jacquard we've woven in the studio to date, 24 meters long, hand woven. Paper textiles in gradation with metallic yarn. And when I show this video to people, I always wish I could weave that fast. But in reality, we couldn't weave quite as fast. It shows a little bit different type of metallic yarn with specially spin, and the beige material is paper, in sort of closer relation to the story of forest. So this is the sort of make of it, but on a more sort of important, not a geeky side of it, is how do we translate the data and information within the sculpture? I think that's the very difficult part when we try to create a case when we discuss with UBS, because it's important for the client to understand. Instead of just looking at the pretty sculpture, what are they looking at? How are the air quality data is being translated? So we create a 3D program, and we use different color intensity to reflect the high and lows of AQI, because we want people to understand how the air quality is instantly. And of course, when we map on it, the detail of the exact date being harvested and where it's being harvested is being located on the screen as well. So this is how the back end works. And then on the kiosk, we have an 8K screen that you can touch and look at the instant 3D rendering instead of just walking around the sculpture. So the lighter the color it is, or white, closer to white, that means the lower the AQ, air quality index, which is you get a clear sky, the darker it is, you might get slightly more activity in the area that day. And that creates a movement and dynamics on the sculpture itself. And the interesting thing is the audience can actually choose. They can choose different cities and combination of cities and countries and create their own visuals themselves. And we wanted to make it more interactive, and that's why, in theory, in reality, if the combinations are different, then the visuals result will be completely different. It's also self-choreographed, and that's part of the experience we want to showcase. and it managed to go around 4 different cities. Started from Shanghai and then Taipei, Hong Kong, and London as a finale. And every time when it showcased a new location, we had a new data set. So we can showcase different set of air quality data around that region that clients might be interested in. And that was very interesting for us to study as well, to see actually different people might have different interests on different demographics. So that project, it was really nice because I also get to observe how different people play with the kiosks. Some people are more reserved, some people are very interactive, and they ask a lot of really interesting questions, which helps us to improve the interactivities of the kiosks and infographics as well. So these are more sort of tech-related project, but closer to my heart. As I mentioned, I'm trained as a weaver, so I'm always very interested going back to our sort of hands and how do we really create something that has warmth of heritage. And I was very lucky in 2018, I was invited by a design trust and the Whole Power Mansion to join one of the projects that they are, a conservation project happens in Whole Power Mansion on 15A Taihang Road. I've never been to this building before. I've heard lots of amazing stories which related to the original owner of Taiwan family. But by the time I moved to Hong Kong, it was sort of derelict already, and they've started a renovation project. So the first time I arrived, the renovation project and the conservation project were nearly complete. And these are some of the first few images that are taken. Amazing textures and artwork and these stained glass from the 30s and 40s that so you could really imagine the original owner has a really strong visions of future of how this house can be really lived in and not meant to be a museum. So I always attract really funny brief. Okay, so the brief for this one. Listen. Okay. Elaine, can you please design a 6 meters wide, authentic red carpet? Full stop. That was it. So I was very confused. 6 meters wide, authentic red carpet. What does that mean? It's like, so we had meetings with antiquities monument organizations to make sure, you know, we create as close as a replica as possible. So then, as soon as I heard the word replica and authentic, how is a replica authentic? So does that mean I have to design a copy of the original? So where does the design element comes in to this project? So every single word in this design brief is very contradicting, which I find it quite fun. Being slightly rebellious and unconventional textile designer, I was like, okay, game on. And then I was very lucky. I couldn't find one single picture of this complete carpet, of the original carpet. There were so many missing like bits and pieces of the original carpet, so I said to them, well, we couldn't quite create an exact replica because there was no exact image of that original carpet. So there's room for development, right? Today. Yeah, okay. So I went to libraries and also meet different professors, historians, to understand what these motif means historically, how significant it is. So then I went back to what I mentioned and tried to understand the statement of this new space because it's been turned into a music school. So I said, Roger, do you want us to turn into a museum that people will never step onto this carpet? Or do you want us to be a part of anticipations of the future, how it would live and dance with the music, with the musicians that you guys are training? And of course they said they choose the latter one of anticipation for the future. So I was like, great. So then I was really thinking, how can we have a carpet that sing and dance with the music? Looking at the way how we see screens at the moment, everything we look through the screens is digitalized. Everything is pixelated. So then that first thing I came to mind, can we actually exaggerate the pattern and pixelate the carpet as a concept to build the foundation, the idea of weaving around the clock? Because if you pick on words, when you weave, we use the unit pix and pixels as well. So voila, that became the foundation of the design. And then the first animation I shared with Antiquity and one more organization was, I want to create a very animated phoenix. And then, of course, seeing this, they were very confused. So you want a phoenix to disappear and move? And I said, well, you know, along those lines. So I started researching and looking into materials that can interact with temperature, light, UV, and really to celebrate the natural quality of the household, you know. And of course, our crafting production partners, Typing Carpet, with 60 years of craftsmanship, they really know how to execute with new yarns. So I wasn't a very popular person because I've introduced 11 new yarns that I've never used before. Nevertheless, together we've created this really beautiful carpet. You can see the pixels element and the shape and the colors is really reflecting the stained glass on both sides, the moon gate. And of course, the entire carpet was hand tufted. We have over 72 combinations of yarn in order to create all these amazing gradations to show the delicate of the wings, the gold element to make it so three-dimensional, so flamboyant, and how we shave and review like extra reflection on the bottom. So not only it can be sensitive to temperature to change in color, it is also light reflective, and it is also UV responsive. So then it's sensitive to change of condition. I want people every time when they revisit, they see something different. So there's a special story to the pixels. I mentioned because the way how we see things now is digitalized, that's why the pixels is sort of considered. But also, there's beautiful original flooring at the reception, and having a 6-meter carpet covering it is quite sad. So I felt like I really should celebrate the proportions of the wooden floorings and how it's being aligned. So the direction and the size and proportion of each of the grid is reflecting with this original proportion of the flooring. So that's something that we work really hard on. It looks so simple, but trust me, Typing Carpenters also work so hard to get this one right. So you can see this is the reflection of the part of the carpet. And that's the key elements we end up working, just focusing on the phoenix itself. And this is a little animation to show the change of colors, because it was really difficult to capture the whole view. And then most importantly, the original furniture has to be put back on. And so not to mention why the phoenix were placed in the location where we decided to put on, because we have to take considerations of the original furniture has been put back on the exact location where it was since the 1930s. Yeah, so that's one of my favorite projects that executed in Hong Kong, because it was really rare to able to work with such amazing textile company with such a long heritage. And the carpet was woven in Xiamen. And then my recent journey. So, okay, I mentioned that I'm a material girl, so I couldn't just focus working with just yarns and textiles. And a sort of identity of me. Recently, I've been appointed as Chief Material Innovator of Nature Square. The opportunity is really about working with huge amount of waste. You could imagine a material girl, you'd be working with something a bit more precious, right? But the fantastic opportunity is how do you work with waste and turn them into real treasure? And craftsmanship is always a really important part of my journey, and this journey brought me to the Philippines and work with hundreds of different artisans. And is anyone familiar with this? This is eggshell inlay. Actually, this came from China. It's not, a lot of people think, oh, it's a Vietnamese craft, but it came from a Tang dynasty, inlaying eggshells onto furniture as a decorated method. And this is also something Nature Square has been very well known for. But when I first sort of joined the team, I said, well, very well, it's very good looking as a decorated part, but shall we have a look at how much waste there is of eggshell? There's over 80 million matrix tons of waste of eggshell per year. If we're just using it as a decorative material, we're wasting a huge amount of opportunity. And of course, when I was working in the Philippines, there's so many landfills everywhere. I'm sure not a lot of people have seen landfill in life because we're so lucky in Hong Kong, you know. If there's any landfill that's been covered and it's really far out in the city, we'll never get a chance to even smell them or get close to them. But whereas places in the Philippines is everywhere, it's people's livelihood, neighborhood. So that really made me decide I really have to do something with this company to see how we can turn a decorative material into a volume and turn it into a real material that we can apply in interiors and architectures beyond just a surface design. So typically people think eggshell that weight about 6 grams. It doesn't really have a lot of impact, but actually it's a really expensive waste to get rid of because it is a type of food waste and it smells and it gives out methane gas in landfill. So I really want to walk away looking from the traditional horizontal economy of eggshell, just looking at it as a food and draw it into landfill. So I started looking at eggshells, not as eggshell, but as more of a fragment, as a material. Looking at how it's rich in calcium, it can absorb like CO2, it's strong, and it's great opportunity to turn into bioplastic, instead of just looking at its eggshell. Having quite a playful mind, I always think like, okay, what can we do with it? If we're not cooking with it, or if we're cooking with it, you find, where do you find eggs being used most? Bakery, right? Or in the central kitchen. So that's where we collect eggshells from, accumulatively, working with local partners, with central kitchen and central bakeries. And so I've reversed the idea of, we'll put these wastes back into the oven and bake it, and let's see what happened. Of course, we get this really beautiful earth tone colors. Look at these, and even at a very low temperature, we roast it into these beautiful colors without adding any pigments to it. So that's the beginning of the project, just by playing with it in the oven. And of course, our client will say, can you add more colors to it? You know. So we designed our own RGB range. The red is represented by madder, G represented by corpholine, and B is represented by indigo. They're all different parts of extracts of plants. So we're really trying to bring the outdoor elements, nature, indoor, into the material. Now, I know everyone's asking, oh, so how recyclable is this, or how much of a closed loop it is. So instead of just looking at our internal closed loop, we really just want to look into designing a formula to provide opportunity that it can have new loops opportunity of upcycling the material. The first material that we have will turn the material formula into is a tile product. So these are the bake range, this is the curve-fill-in, which is one of my favorite. Because when I was designing it, I wasn't really focusing on designing a product. It was more like the versatility of this formula, what it can do. So it can put through a CNC, it can put through a mold presser, and also just as a regular tile cutter.
Being sustainable conscious, as a designer, I feel we have to design smart. I find it very interesting to work with Nature Squared. We want to educate a wider audience how waste can be seen as luxury material. Egg and eggshells are something that everyone is familiar with, and it is very versatile. It made me really curious to think, other than going to landfill, what could be the second life of eggshell? The form of eggshell is very intriguing because it came naturally as a seamless round shape, and naturally it will break itself and turn into fragments with sharp edges. So the natural transformation of eggshells really inspired me to look into the new possibility of how we can use eggshells and to create different form and function, tiles and eggshell products to serve our modern space. Colour has always been a very important part of my life. One of the most surprised elements during the design journey was interacting eggshells with natural dye. Indigo, madder, and chlorophyll are the three key natural dye elements we have explored in this collection. The natural dyeing process is very interesting because the eggshells react slightly differently. All the fragments turn out to be a very unique colour, and I think that's one of the most surprising elements. Every single hand-molded tiles is presenting the artisan's handwriting within the tile itself along the characteristics of the natural material. So I think that's the beauty of our handmade tile. The most challenging part of the project is how to strike a balance between handmade and the technology that we involved in the project. So careful consideration not only comes from the material itself, the craftsmanship, but also the engineering of the mold that we've created. Nature Square is not just about making decorative services, it's also about function, material that is available for wider audience, such as architects, interior designers, people who are eco-conscious for products application, and look at my product not from a waste angle, but look at from as a regenerative value angle. I really want to intrigue our audiences how eggshells can be very different. They're not fragile, they are something that's very functional and practical use in life. Imagine you sitting on eggshells, you're standing on eggshells, you're touching eggshells, or you're leaning eggshells. We want to create possibilities and allow our audience to dream with us and lead us to the new possibility of what eggshells could be. So that gives you an overview of what this Carolee collection is about. And we created this bond scenography for Rosanna Orlandi in 2021 at Milan Design Week, and we've used over 150,000 eggshells to transform. So all the way from the stairs to the flooring, stools, pillars, screens. I wanted everyone to experience
with such a fragile material, you can really create a household with it. You can really create the whole atmosphere and how to integrate with different parts of a space. I'm sure there's amazing architects and interior designers can think of a better way of using these materials. This is an illustration of how it can be and how dynamic these could be applied. So this is how eggshell can be. But I just really want to wrap up with a really quick introduction of what we did for this year's Milan Design Week to really celebrate beyond one person's journey. What else can we do with this eggshell material currently? So this year in 2022, Milan Design Week, we collaborated with Another View, which is a digital media artist, very well known for traveling a different part of the world and do a 24 hours recording of a very precise scenery. So they went to India and they captured, let's see if it's working. They captured a banyan tree and activities within the banyan tree within a very special location. And these are some of the footage from the video. So they made a 24 hours videos, and then there's a lot of celebrations, kids running around, there are lots of monkeys and bonfire of natural activities, women-made activities. And usually, with the video, it comes with quite a flamboyant window screen. So it's looking, that's why they call the creatives themselves another view, like looking from another angle. And I really want to celebrate it through from the digital content into physical content of this life ritual and culture. They shared some of like the behind the scene photos, which I even think, oh, they're so rich, and how do we translate? The textiles was one of the key inspiration, actually. They captured the very typical, like, sort of Indian textiles, and that was translated into a tent, a temporary tent, where they were observing from and have the camera covered to do the 24-hour photo shoots. My design brief, yet again, is to design a frame. Such a difficult brief because, like, frame full sides. But I really want to build a theatrical experience and not restrict it just with four sides. This was, this was the tent, the temporary tent that the crew has created for them to film the banyan tree. And I always thought this itself is very flamboyant, like the color and also the shapes of the graphics. And then the next conversations I had with the team, because I wanted to reflect the local culture with a lot of bamboo, and also you can see this tent is made out of scraps that they found locally, and I want to do a sort of impersonation of what we can do with recycled material from the Philippines. It can be luxury, Everyone's been saying, oh, recycled material, Elaine. So do you make really ugly textiles? That's what the first impression everyone's asked. So how ugly are the textiles? Like, no, this is a very backwards sort of comment, Like, recycled or upcycled material can be very beautiful and luxury looking. And for example, this is made from construction bamboo in the Philippines. And then we've got abaca, which is one of the strongest fiber you can find, antibacterial, anti-UV, and different types of, and then we've got eggshells as well. And these are some of the textiles I've also designed recently. And it was designed for outdoor space in Milan, and also, again, in Rossano Orlandi's backyard. And this is my frame. There's no simple four sides. It has to be a little bit more flamboyant than a four lines sort of structure. And it really show how by inspiring by other people's stories, how we can really push our craftsmen and our narrative even further, and also how we work with the eggshell material in a new way, the new textures we've created, the new way we've molded with textile this time, not just the eggshell itself. And yeah, and so this is one of the new projects that I wanted to share with everyone, how I felt everyone can do little parts of what they really enjoy, but I think every few decades at Paul Pullman says, every few decades we have opportunity to make a drastic change the way how we live and to empower ourselves. So that's it for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elaine, for your valuable insight. I'll now open the floor to a few questions, if there are any. If not, I have a question actually. Since you work with a lot of textiles and new materials, is there any interest from, say, like more mainstream fashion brands or fashion groups to kind of incorporate that into their kind of their lines?
That's a good question, because actually at the beginning everyone thought I'm more fashion orientated, but then soon after they saw like the way how I construct fabrics. Because at the beginning when I set up the studio, there were quite a few fashion designers came and said, oh, can we weave something off this loom? And I said, well, it's difficult because actually you need to weave so much and explain. In Hong Kong, actually, it's very rare to get hand-woven fabric, and then it's also very price conscious as well. So no, actually, I have worked with a few fashion brand, but more with the Mountain Village project and Guizhou that I have as a women empowerment project, but not so much straight from the studio of Alvin.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Elaine. Thanks for the talk. I noticed that in your design, you take more of a minimalism kind of approach. You tend to bias more towards color, and I know that in art and in architecture, some designers they tend to look at patterns. They like repetitions and patterns, and they would draw inspiration from the local neighborhood, and then they try to design a new pattern and try to go make repetition of pattern into the design. But I noticed that you kind of like to keep it kind of low-key, minimal, and just kind of focus on the color. Can you just kind of comment on that? How you kind of look at the two approach and yeah, thanks.
I think there's no right or wrong for either way, but my personal interest is in a lot of focus on a lot of techniques and the textures of the material and the production methodologies of the material. And because I'm not trained as an interior designer or architect, that's why I always felt like if I can make a material that could provide suggestions of how it can apply, and that's where my role is. And whereas I think a lot of, as you mentioned, architecture or interior design is the form and how it can create a spatial experience for the client or the neighborhood. It's more of what they would focus on. So I think it's more like a collaboration synergy to create by using the material I create, and then they can transform to elevate it even better.
Thank you so much.